Hello, my name is Andy Mock with CATS. I'm the LYNX Senior Project Manager for the LYNX Silverline project. I'm here tonight to give you a presentation on our preliminary staff recommendations for Focus Area 1. But before I get into the details too much, I'd like to recognize CATS CEO John Lewis and make some introductory comments tonight.
Thank you, Andy, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Charlotte Area Transit System, the project team, and all of our staff at CATS, I want to thank you for joining us this evening for this really important report out on the LYNX Silverline. You know, in 2018, when we opened the second phase of the Blue Line extension, we were so excited about providing the mobility options that important project provided to the region. But right after that, we turned to the team and said, it's time to begin the study of the Silver Line. And over the last couple of years, we've moved through the quarter analysis, moved into the preliminary design and engineering. And despite the challenges that the pandemic has brought about, I want to say this team has done a fantastic job of pivoting, exploring virtual opportunities that allow us to continue working with the community to define the necessary alignments that will best serve the goals of this project, not just from a mobility standpoint, but also from a larger community standpoint. And your input is so very important if we're going to achieve that goal. We're in our third round of public outreach, and once again, hearing from the community members is without a doubt the most important part of this preliminary design and engineering. We're in the process of honing down many different alternatives and getting down to the final design option that we will be taking to our governing board later this spring. And so thank you again for participating this evening. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andy and the design team to go through tonight's information.
Thank you, John. First, and thank you for those introductory comments, I'd like to thank that we have a panel of professionals from different municipalities and jurisdictions, kind of our experts, who will help us in the live Q&A. There's certainly a large team pushing forward the LYNX Silverline. And so tonight we have the benefit of their experience to help answer some of those questions and answers. And I'd like to also recognize any elected officials who might be on tonight and thank them for their attention on this very important meeting. So just this slide is just really a note for our panelists. Please remain on mute until the Q&A portion of the meeting. Participants, please log into your Gmail or your YouTube account to participate in the live Q&A. For the best quality streaming, log off any organizational VPN. That's kind of a lesson learned from the last round of public meetings. And post questions in the chat box to be answered at the end of the meeting. So the agenda for tonight is pretty straightforward and pretty clear. I'm going to provide an overview of the project, the LYNX Silverline project, and the alignment refinement. We're going to do a focus area preliminary staff recommendations, so a presentation of our preliminary staff recommendations, and then we're going to do a live Q&A. We'll also go over the online open house. And that is a website that allows the public to go in and to evaluate. Basically, most of the information that you're going to see tonight is available on our website, and I'll show you how to get there so you can access it in your own time. But I think it's really important for us to recognize the folks who are really pushing forward this project on a daily basis. And so besides myself, I've got Jenna Nichols. She's the LYNX Silverline Deputy Project Manager with the design team. We've got Ajanelle Poole, our LYNX Silverline Public Information Officer. She's the one who makes all this outreach possible. John Howard is the LYNX Silverline TOD, or Transit-Oriented Development Study Project Manager. That's looking at the land use improvements around the LYNX Silverline station. Then Jason Lawrence, the LYNX Silverline Rail Trail Project Manager, who's pushing forward a team that's evaluating the feasibility of including rail trail at the very beginning of the Silverline. It's really, to zoom out before we zoom in, this is all part of a much broader coordinated effort, including all the parties that you see here and others. Includes the 2030 Transit Corridor System Plan, the broader system plan that we're evaluating, Connect Beyond, which is looking at the regional aspect of how we can serve the broader region with transit. The Charlotte 2040 comp plan is a big part of this as far as land use vision. And as part of the team, we also, as I said before, we have the LYNX Silverline Rail Trail and TOD team, all part of the broader Silverline program. We also have the Gaston and Union County planning, the MPOs for those municipalities, as well as all the NCDOT projects. And because many of the light rail alignment is either adjacent or within NCDOT right-of-way. So very important stakeholder and player in the Silverline. And then, of course, the town of Matthews planning and all the municipalities who and all the planning efforts that are going on within the project. So just to kind of jump into it, the first slide that we're going to show here is kind of at a high level, our preliminary staff recommendation. It looks very similar to the preliminary staff recommendation coming out 2019. You'll see some of the details, and I'll walk the public through those details when we get into it. And so just for information, the project is really big. So it's the way that it's scoped at the moment from Focus Area 1 through Focus Area 6 is 26 miles. And because of that size, we determined that we really need to break it up into smaller bite-sized chunks so people could understand it. And so the way we've done it is these focus areas, and that's shown in these colored areas. Focus Area 1 is from Belmont to I-485. And that's the focus of tonight's. Tomorrow night's will be Focus Area 2, and that's everything from I-485 to Center City along Wilkinson Blvd. Focus Area 3 is in Center City, and that's from Moorhead Street to Independence Boulevard near Central Avenue, and that includes stops for Charlotte Gateway Station and the Blue Line. That's on Thursday. Focus Area 4 is Independence Corridor, including Bojangles and Ovens Arena, and that's next Tuesday. Focus Area 5 is the transition from Independence Boulevard to Monroe Road, and then out Monroe Road to the town of Matthews. And then finally, Focus Area 6, that is the Union County component of the project, including everything from CPCC Levine near I-485 in the town of Matthews through the town of Stallings and then into Indian Trail. So that's kind of the way we've broken up the meeting, and that's the meetings, and that's the way that we've broken up our presentations. But to kind of continues at the zoom out level, really we wanted to take a moment to kind of recognize the preliminary purpose of the project. The purpose and need is a statement that we make to the federal government as we're going through this process, this preliminary planning and environmental process, to kind of identify why are we doing this. So the preliminary purpose of the project is to provide a competitive and reliable transit alternative, to improve local connectivity and access to housing, employment, and community services in the corridor, to promote opportunities for development, provide a transit system that is financially sustainable to build, operate, and maintain, and that preserves and protects the natural and built environment. When we presented that to the public in September, that purpose and need statement, and we got a really favorable response to those purposes of the project. And that also kind of went through what we call early scoping, which is a kind of an early federal environmental screening process to identify any high-level issues that might be identified with the project. So we've, that part of that process, the team that were evaluating the permitting agencies can review some of the previous planning studies and the adopted locally preferred alternative, identified the alignment refinement options and the potential station locations that we presented at that time through the round 2 meeting in September. Also, we presented the preliminary public purpose and need of the project, including feedback from the public on the purpose and need, any potential environmental concerns, and the public engagement methods that we were proceeding. Just note, like most people, we were trying to figure out how to deal with the pandemic at the time, and we really had to change the way that we did things, including the methods of our public engagement, and that continues today with these virtual meetings. So some of the public engagement feedback that we received from the early scoping in fall and September is we had over 800 comments, which was really good response, which we've worked to respond toward. The top project priorities that we received from the survey were about local connectivity, and that's about getting people to the from where they live to the light rail and then wherever they need to be, and travel time, ensuring that we have a fast, reliable transit travel trip. So those are kind of the hot button items that we received in our meetings. Nearly 90% of the respondents agreed with the preliminary purpose and need statement. That's a great affirmation of that we're heading down the right path on coming up with the right purpose of this project. There was general support for the project for all the municipalities, including Belmont, the city of Charlotte, all the stakeholders, the town of Matthews, the town of Indian Trail, and the town of Stallings. And 4 of 5 respondents thought alternatives considered were adequate, but other suggestions were considered. People always come up with ideas for us to evaluate, and so we continue to do that as they come up. So where we are in this project is we're at the very beginning of this planning and design process. So we have identified the LPA refinement, the preliminary staff recommendations we're presenting tonight. We're in the process of identifying TOD opportunities with our TOD team and coordinating between the TOD team and the design team to make sure that the stations and the opportunities are best coordinated as possible. We've completed early scoping, and we're heading towards the MTC adoption of the refined LPA. And we intend to have that adoption in the April timeframe with an information to the Metropolitan Transit Commission, who is our governing board, would be in the March timeframe after the public meetings. Once we have the adopted alignments, the alignments in the stations adopted, then we'll begin more of the detailed stationary planning work and design work that goes along with the project of this nature to make sure that we really don't want to get too far down the road until we feel really good about the stations and alignments. At that point, once we complete all that work and get into more of the 15% more detailed engineering, we'll continue that process, and then we'll enter into the formal federal process called project development. And that's when we really start to seek that federal funding. So, I put this slide on all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, but I think it's really effective to describe kind of the process that we're going on. So the locally preferred alternative that was adopted back in 2019 was a general corridor. So it was kind of, we've called it a fat line or a Sharpie line or whatever you'd like to think about it. It's a general way. We generally knew we wanted to be in Belmont near Park Street, and we generally knew we were, following Wilkinson Boulevard to Center City, and then beyond out to the town of Matthews. But it wasn't very specific, and really didn't get into a lot of the things that we really need to understand, such as how is the light rail configured in the street? Is it on the side? Is it in the middle? Is it aerial? Is it under? How are we getting through major streets, over, under? We crossing a grade? How are the stations laid out? So the only way we really came up with figuring that out is really to break up that fat line into many, many skinny lines and to evaluate different configurations of the LPA alignment. And we really came up with about 100 different ways that you could envision the Silver Line going from Belmont to Indian Trail. And from there, the goal is to take those many lines and boil those down to one line, receive public input on that recommended alignment, and then get that adopted through the Metropolitan Transit Commission. And so really taking the big line and breaking that into the 100 lines, the way we kind of did that was, we worked with all the stakeholders and partner agencies along the entire 26 miles, but really kind of using kind of a more detailed look at this corridor than really as anyone's ever looked at before, with a more detailed engineering and environmental analysis. Really looking for different ways that we can configure this, and then when we look at a different way to configure the alignment, what are the impacts of that? The good, the bad, and the ugly. We also look for changes in the corridor. The West Corridor was adopted in 2019, so it's relatively new and it has been studied relatively recently. But there's certainly parts of the alignment that haven't been looked at for quite some time, many of those in the Southeast Corridor. And so there's things have changed in the last 5 years that we really need to take some time and understand what those changes are and how could we get comfortable with those changes. Do we need to change, or do we need to do something different? Really a heavy dose of public input. Right, so that has been the mantra and the marching orders over the last year, is to get as much public input and stakeholder engagement as possible on the alignment choices, so we could feel as comfortable as we could feel with the alignment moving forward. So coordination with other projects is one of the big things that we really try to accomplish as well, because there are so many different projects, many of them NCDOT projects that are proceeding. And so we really wanted to take the first phase and get as coordinated as we can with those many projects to ensure that both projects, all the projects, can move forward, and that neither one is overly dependent on the other. And then, of course, we wanted to take some time to really evaluate any lessons learned from the Blue Line. Many people on the CATS team have worked on the Blue Line or Blue Line extension, and so we really wanted to take some time to learn any good things that we did and do them again, or room for improvement, and make adjustments in the future. So once we kind of using all that data and all that experience, we kind of had these 100 different lines. Then the question is, well, how do you take it from 100 different lines and boil it down to one? And so we came up with a decision-making or recommendation framework, which was really based on benefits and risks. And the goal is to maximize the benefits and lower the risks of any particular alignment that we're evaluating. The three major benefits that we were trying to maximize was to enhance travel time. There's light rail operations. Everyone wants a fast, reliable trip from their home to wherever they're going. Local connectivity. Everyone, you need to be able to get to the stations very easily and quickly, whether that's as a pedestrian, a bicyclist, transferring from another bus service, or from a vehicle. And then there's the secondary benefits of development opportunities around the stations. That's a big focus to really kind of come up with that planning that comes around after the infrastructure, the hard light rail infrastructure has been planned and laid out. How can we all best benefit, and how can we create those great places around the stations that we all want to see? All the while, we're trying to put forward a project that we can move into more of an implementation mode. So because this project would anticipate to go through a federal funding lens, cost will be always be very important for us to evaluate, both operational and capital costs. Environmental considerations, again, because of the federal component, we'll have to go through a very detailed federal process of evaluation of environmental issues and concerns. And also to coordinate with others, make sure that our project is well coordinated and not at risk of slowing someone else up or us being slowed down by somebody else. All along, continuing the public engagement. These next couple slides show in a little more detail those kind of risks and benefits. Really, they boil down, and they boil down a lot more. There's a lot of metrics in here as well. We're really looking at minimizing those dependencies, advancing a timely and cost-effective project, minimizing design elements that are overly complex, minimizing negative environmental impacts, and minimizing disruption to residential and businesses, and seeking to achieve broad public support. So some of those risks that we're trying to manage, all the while trying to maximize the reliability of travel time, the competitiveness, the connectivity goals, and the development goals around the stations. So just as a note for decision-making purposes, people who like this sort of thing might get a kick out of it. So our goal is to try to minimize the risks and maximize the benefits. So if we have an alignment alternative, if we have laid out 4 or 5 different ways to lay something out, then if we, in our evaluation, if the one that has the least risk is also the most benefit, well, then that puts us into a box up here that, that would be our recommendation, the one that had the least risk and the most benefit. However, if they're not the same, if the least risk is not the same as the most benefit, then you get down to a question here of does the option with the greater benefits have acceptable risk, or is it worth it to seek these benefits to take the risk? And so if the most benefit option has acceptable risks, then that's our recommendation. If the option that has more risks than benefits, then we choose the least risk option. So now to get into our preliminary staff recommendations in focus area 1, I'll take a moment just to kind of orient you to this map. This map was part of our public outreach materials. We sent out a number of these maps, paper maps. If you live within a half mile of our alignment, you should have received something like this. To orient you to this, and it's pretty important, and I think the legend is really important, the purple line is our preliminary staff recommendation. You'll see some gray lines in some places down here on the right side. Those are alignments that we have evaluated but are not recommending at this time. Another thing to note, these boxes are kind of recommendation areas where we've actually either we're making a decision or we're putting forward a recommendation that may be different than the LPA. In some cases it's not, but it's kind of the focus area of the conversation for public engagement. And if you see a yellow triangle with a exclamation point, that kind of notes that there's a recommended change from the locally preferred alternative that was adopted. And then we describe what that recommendation is. So in this case, just to walk through these two, and then I'll get into some of the aerial maps. We have two recommendation or decision zones in this area. One is about the terminus near the Belmont area. And here, the recommendation is to continue the alignment along the northern side of Wilkinson Boulevard. This was similar to the locally preferred alternative, which terminated or stopped short of Park Street. Our preliminary staff recommendation is to take it beyond Park Street with a station near Holly Avenue. And we think that's near the Belmont Abbey's owns some of that property in that area. I also like to note that there were some media outlets who reported that we were taking the alignment to Belmont Abbey. That was a mistake, or that was a kind of miscommunication. We're taking the alignment in the station a little bit beyond Park Avenue to a piece of property that's owned by Belmont Abbey. So it's a little bit of a nuance. But the alignment continues to be on the north side with a terminus at Belmont Station. And one of the main reasons that we feel like that's a good thing is it really has an opportunity to provide some interesting redevelopment and TOD development in that area, and one of those benefits we're trying to achieve. Also has some better connections to the station for those areas around it than the previous LPA. The other decision zone that we've talked about is the alignment that's on the other side of the river. And don't worry, I have some maps that we can talk a little bit more detail on the next couple slides. So that recommendation on the other side of the river in Mecklenburg County is to transition from the northern side, which we have on the Belmont side, to the southern side. And the primary reason for that recommendation is really to minimize business impacts. Folks familiar with that section of Wilkinson Boulevard between the river and I-485 know that there's a lot of pretty major industrial users, including a number of Amazon facilities in there. And so we thought that the impact of building the light rail along the side of the road and disrupting those driveways was too impactful. So we've recommended to go to the south side where there's less driveways. And so now to get into kind of a little detail, and I'll say that when we go to our website, this is something that you can pull up these maps and this information, and you can look at it on your own terms. So this is the same sort of thing. The purple line shows the preliminary recommendation. The gray line show alignments that we've evaluated that are not recommending at this time. And so this just really shows the same thing. I'll just take a moment to walk through that. We are along the northern side with the station in front of the Walmart and Lowe's near the Belmont Abbey owned property. Belmont Abbey is across 85. Continuing along, it goes over Holly Avenue. So bridging over Holly Avenue, the light rail does, and also bridging over Park Street, because there's some traffic concerns with that intersection. Then coming back down the grade, following that along the northern side, or the curb side on the north of Wilkinson Boulevard, then bridging over the Catawba River on a separate bridge, separate than the NCDOT bridge replacement that's being discussed or pursued. Then, after we get past the river, it transitions from the northern side to the southern side near Moore Chapel Loop, with a crossing at Old Dowd. A bridge over Old Dowd. Then coming back down the grade and following along the southern side of the curb of Wilkinson Boulevard, the whole way across Sam Wilson Road, and then crossing back to the northern side. So that's one thing to note. With this alignment, because of all these industrial users, the light rail does propose to cross over Wilkinson Boulevard twice, and that would be on bridges. So the light rail would go up and over on a bridge from the north to the south, and then from the south back to the north to hit the airport's planned multimodal center. So we'll go into more detail. Let me kind of go through the rest of my presentation, then we can talk about any more detailed questions that folks might have. So as far as public engagement goes, so we can go online, and I'll show you how to get to that online open house for videos and all the same information that you saw today, including live maps, so people can pan around and see the different maps and different ways of looking at the aerial photography. On there's also a public survey. Please take it. We really want to have a good survey result. You'll be able to download some of these materials as well. The live virtual meetings are the next couple of weeks, as you know, and we're also always actively having community and organizational meetings all the time. So we're meeting with folks as much as we can in a more focused way. And you can always contact us via email, phone, or mail, and contact Ajanelle Poole. She's the best person to put you in contact with the right person. Our preliminary staff recommendation comment period is from February 2nd through March 11th. That's the survey period. So please don't wait, and please fill out the survey as soon as you can, ideally afterwards. You can also text survey results to the Silver Line to 704-461-4441. You can email any comments to linksilverline@publicinput.com. You can call the customer service line at 704-336-7433. The voicemail for comments, if you'd like to leave a voicemail, is 704-461-4441, code 6636. Or you can mail to Kat's, care of the marketing department, at 3200 South Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28209. As far as next steps, we're in the public engagement process, where we're reaching out to folks for these preliminary recommendations to seek any input. From that, we'll take that input and roll that into our MTC adoption process. All along, we're working with people, meeting with elected officials and boards along the alignment. We intend to present the staff recommendation to the MTC for information in March, and then action in April. Then following up on that, then we'll really begin the environmental review, preliminary design, and ongoing engagement. So we're going to advance the light rail design, environmental surveying, stationary planning, rail trail alignment will be defined, and affordable housing strategies will be developed. I also want to note that as we really get into design, there are chances where, stations will move. We're continuing to evaluate, and that design environmental process will also inform some of these decisions. And so if any adjustments need to be made, we'll do whatever the right appropriate engagement, public engagement process to support that would be as well. So I did want to note that. So now we're getting into the Q&A section. So panelists, please remain on mute. Unmute yourself to answer questions directly to you. Participants, please log into your Gmail or YouTube account to participate in the live chat. If you have any questions, post them in the chat box to be answered at the end of the meeting. But before we get into that, I did want to take a moment to go through the online open house, at least to show you where that is. Let me stop share. Share screen. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that delay. So this is the CATS website. This is www.ridetransit.org. Please, there was somebody give me an indication they can see the website. I hope they can. Yeah. Great, thank you. Great, thank you. So this is our website. If you go to this website and then go down to projects, transit planning, to Silver Line, this was the kind of the launching pad for the online open house. So if you click on this hyperlink right here, online open house, it will take you to this website, which will give you much more detail of the alignment. So this will show the map that they presented tonight, details about all the upcoming engagement, much of the same information that we shared tonight. So if you don't remember something, please go back and check it here. A video kind of getting into some of that decision-making process, if you'd like to watch that. some timelines. But really, one of the things that people, I think, really like to see is here's all the recommendations. So every recommendation slide is available on this website. So you can click through that. And you can also go to the map, the online virtual map, and pan around and zoom to different areas that you might be interested in. It's the same purple map. So that's some consistency. And then there's also this is also where you can access the survey and the live public meeting information. So here's how you fill out the survey and information about that. So I just wanted, before we get into the Q&A and get caught up in that detail, I wanted to take a moment to go over that, because there'll be a lot of there's a lot of interest in especially the mapping component. So with that, maybe I'll pitch it over to Ajanel, who can walk us through the Q&A through the chat.
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. Again, like Andy said, my name is Ajanel Poole. I'm the Community and Public Relations Specialist for CATS and also for this project. We want to appreciate you taking the time to attend our virtual meeting this evening. Last time we had a series of public meetings, we had to do them virtually, and unfortunately, we are still operating under a pandemic. So have to acknowledge that this is not always the most ideal way to do a public meeting or Q&A, but we appreciate everyone working with us and still engaging with us through this process. So just to reiterate a few things Andy mentioned earlier, we do have a panelist of experts that are going to help us answer your questions. We're going to ask that the panelists please stay on mute until answering a question, and when you do, please turn your camera on. I want to remind our attendees, if you would like to ask the project team a question, please sign into your Gmail or YouTube and ask your question in the chat box, and we will make sure the project team addresses it. And like Andy mentioned earlier, I would suggest signing out of any VPN or organizational servers just for the best connection. We will be answering questions tonight we received during the session and those received prior via phone or mail or email. And we'll do our best to get through all the questions tonight, and questions we don't get to this evening, we will follow up with a Q&A document on the website. As a note, we are discussing Focus Area 1 this evening. So with that, I am going to kick off our Q&A with a topic that we frequently get asked about. And I'm going to ask Jenna Nichols if she can take this one. Again, she's our Deputy Project Manager. And the question is, how is CATS coordinating with the Connect Beyond effort?
Well, thank you, Ajanel. I'm actually going to kick that to the folks that are working on the Connect Beyond effort, Jason Lawrence and Jason Wager.
Thank you, Jenna. Thanks for the football, caught it. And then Jason and I will take this question. So the Connect Beyond effort is a 12-county, 2-state regional transit plan looking at high-capacity transit corridors, integrated bus service strategies, and human service transportation coordinated across all those 12 counties. I'm CAT's rep on that effort, and Jason Wager from Central Iowa also on the call as project manager for the overall effort. And the CATS is currently working very closely with the Connect Beyond effort through the Silver Line and all of our 2030 and bus service planning efforts. And Jason, I don't know if you want to add about the detail of how that coordination is working out.
No, you've hit the high points, JL. I think the main thing is that we know this effort, along with other 2030 plan elements, are ongoing here, in the Mecklenburg, direct Mecklenburg area. So we want to be sure that any plans and future intents, even visions, can align well with what you have going on here. But I think you've covered the high points. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason and Jason. Another frequently asked question we get is about access to the airport. Jenna or someone, would you like to talk about what the connection to the airport will be and maybe some of the reasons of why it will look that way?
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely a popular question. We've said this before, and it still rings true. A project like the Silver Line is a massive multi-generational 50 to 100+ year investment. And we need to make sure that we keep that in mind as we design And we all know there's been a lot of growth in the city of Charlotte. That growth is, is also causing growth at the airport, at the Charlotte airport. So we can imagine that as the Charlotte region continues to grow, so will Charlotte airport. So the airport of today is definitely not the airport of the future. We will have a light rail station that will connect to the airport via a people mover. And it will be coordinated with the airport's future land use and development plans. But that station will be designed so as to be an extension of the main terminal, such that passengers arriving via the light rail will really feel as if they've arrived directly at the airport terminal, with terminal services such as baggage check and ticketing. And then, after checking your bags or printing your tickets, passengers can hop on a quick and direct people mover to take them right into the terminal. This is pretty common, especially post 9/11. It's pretty common to have the light rail stations not go directly into a terminal. Our airport too is unique in the way it's laid out geographically, and we also have that Norfolk Southern corridor that causes us to need to grade separate over that Norfolk Southern track. And because of the layout of the runways, we do have flight path issues that we'd be dealing with if we were trying to grade separate over the Norfolk Southern Railroad freight track. And even if we were to get in there, there's parking decks and circulation issues. And so really what makes the most sense is to have that direct people mover connection. We see examples of this at places like in Phoenix. They have a premier people mover connection from their light rail station. Denver, actually, a lot of folks say, why can't you be like Denver and go right into the terminal? Well, Denver actually is not directly into the terminal. You do still have to get onto a people mover, but it feels like you're right there because you can check your bag when you get off the light rail. So there's a lot of ways in which to make that station be really premier and have those amenities and direct connection feel to the airport. So that's our intention.
Thank you, Jenna. So I'm going to pull a couple questions that we got off of YouTube. Will the design of the westernmost Belmont station allow future continuation of the tracks further west? So Andy or Jason, either one of you want to take that one?
That will be something that we, as we're laying out the design, we'll make sure that there's provision for a future extension beyond the terminus to some future, to a future alignment that may be envisioned through the Connect Beyond process. So that's one thing as we're looking at layouts and alignments that we kind of keep in mind, is making sure that it's not completely hemmed in for some future extension or expansion.
Thank you, Andy. Another question, can you cover which stations will have park and ride, including any decks or surface parking lots?
Yeah, so let me share my screen. But in general, I mean, I could tell you kind of our current thinking. We have not finalized that analysis, but certainly what our current thinking is that we would have a station at Belmont would be a terminus. So that would be a very good place to have a parking garage or some place to capture folks from 85 and along Wilkinson Boulevard and in downtown Belmont and Gaston County. So we certainly would envision having a parking lot or garage at that station. We would also intend to have a parking at the Sam Wilson as well as the I-485. So similar to the Blue Line and Blue Line extension, many of the more suburban stations would mostly have parking. So I'd say at least those three. Now the one closer to the airport and the one near Boyer, may not, because there's active uses that we're directly serving, such as, the airport and the Goodwill Opportunity Zone. So those are kind of some of the thinking there. But certainly, out here, the last three on Wilkinson Boulevard, along Wilkinson Boulevard, we've envisioned to have parking of some kind.
Thank you, Andy. What potential sites are being considered for the maintenance facility?
So there's a couple sites we're looking at. For the most part, we're looking at sites in and around the airport. We haven't really worked out in a final detail or a final alignment for or a final recommendations to those sites, but we are working with the airport to identify the best potential alignment or potential location. We're also looking at some other alignments, other parts of the corridor as well, but that's kind of a work in progress. So we really don't have a final recommendation for that at this time.
Thank you, Andy. Another question that we frequently get is about potential property impacts. What about my business and property, which sits directly in front of Walmart and Lowe's in Belmont? How will it be affected?
Yeah, so one thing to note, we're very early and very conceptual. We really can't say for the most part that any particular property is going to be the level of impact. For any particular property. We're at, really just coming up to conceptual design. We really don't know a lot of things about the footprint of the project and how much property that will actually need. So that will come with progressed design. So as we begin to progress our design after we get the adopted alignment, we'll learn a lot more about the needs of the project, and then we'll be reaching out once we kind of have the footprint of the project directly understood. Then we'll be reaching out to property owners to approach them about acquiring property for the project. We also have to complete a lot of environmental studies before we can really do a lot of that acquisition as well. So it's going to be quite a while before we're really ready to start knocking on doors and reaching out to folks about property that we need for the project. But we'll know a lot more moving forward the next couple of years about the property that is needed. We'll try to minimize impacts as much as possible to businesses and residential, but there certainly will be some as part of this project. I can't say on your particular property or business, if you'd like to leave your contact information in the chat, we can maybe follow back up with you and learn a little bit more about your business, and maybe there's ways we can work with you.
Thank you, Andy. And yes, to reiterate what he said, if you have any follow-up questions, please email us at the project email address. Another question, is the intersection of Wilkinson and Old Dowd going to be improved? The latest work didn't help traffic flow from Old Dowd and onto Wilkinson at PM rush. Backup with light rail could get worse.
Yeah, so the current concept for Wilkinson and Old Dowd would be the light rail would go over it, go over the intersection. So we don't think we would be improving it in that we wouldn't be likely needing to reconstruct it, but we certainly wouldn't be adding a crossing of the light rail under the current concept. So if you follow the purple line, we're coming from the northern side, bridging up and over Wilkinson Boulevard, and that would mean we're staying high over Old Dowd Road. And then we would come back down the grade on the other side. So at this point, the light rail is not going through there at grade, meaning the gates would come down whenever the light rail comes through. So we wouldn't be making it worse, but we probably aren't necessarily making it better either under our current concept. Now I'll say that as this project moves forward, there are also going to be a suite of capital projects which will complement the Silver Line, and I'm not sure if maybe this intersection might be part of that, and maybe there's some stationary improvements that might be identified in the upcoming process that might cause funding to improve that intersection. So I think that will come as the stationary planning process and infrastructure program starts to be identified.
Thank you, Andy. Can you please expand on the rail trail? For example, the length plus width built at the same time, or segments will it be marked bike lanes? So I think this is a great question for Jason Lawrence.
It's a great question for Jason.
Thank you, Anjanelle and Andy. Yes, that is you hit on the things that are so important for us to determine for the rail trail effort. And our current thinking at this point is that we would run in with the project when we're possible, particularly sections that Andy's identified here where we're running side running. The goal would be with the project as much as possible. We're still looking at what the definition of width is. Somewhere around the 10 to 12 foot range is what our current thinking is. Now, when the project goes aerial or goes across the river, for example, we're not anticipating that we would be with the project once it goes over large structures, and that that is where we would need to define some off-trail segments that get us across intersections and get us to reconnect with parts of the project that we can parallel with.
Thank you, Jason. Sorry, still trying to get through. Another YouTube question: has a river stop been considered? What was the result? And for context, talking about adding a stop at the river by ISWA Nature Preserve or on the Belmont side at Samuel Staub by Stoves by the Belmont Park. Andy, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ajnal. It might be an opportunity to go back and circle back to the system planning process. So the system plan identified some potential alignments and stations back in 2019. I don't know, Jason, during the system planning process, was a station kind of as recommended or asked about, was that evaluated at that time?
No, I think during the system planning piece, Sam Wilson was the kind of the last Mecklenburg station. The station was not identified in this area, and then we identified a station in the city of Belmont. So that was not considered during the early system planning process. I think with all the issues with some of the nature preserve there, we were focused on getting across the river at the time.
Yeah, just to note to that point, there's a Duke transmission line, and our station platforms need to be on flat, straight sections of track. So it would be very difficult to shoehorn a station in here with the Duke transmission line and on this curvature, as well as the protected parkland property directly adjacent. So that would be a challenge for us. So Jenna, did you want to add anything? I saw you pipe in.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. The park trying to avoid parkland impacts, keeping the crossing of the river as tight as we can, and then the Duke transmission line. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you all. A question: why are there so many bridges? Is it possible for it to be elevated until the south side of Wilkinson?
Well, I mean, the main reason that we build bridges is to avoid traffic conflicts, both to make traffic worse. We don't want to make traffic worse, existing traffic. So if there's a heavily trafficked intersection, we usually try to bridge over it or grade separated over it in some way, whether that's over or under. Generally, bridging over it is more straightforward from a construction perspective. It's usually a little less expensive and a little less risky. There's not a bunch of things underground that we have to avoid. So in general, we favor towards aerial options. We do try to minimize the bridges where necessary, but in some areas where there's a lot of traffic concerns, or there's a lot of there's a river and streams and environmental features, a bridge just kind of makes sense for us to proceed with. So that's generally why we choose bridges. Also, because sometimes we have very strict criteria as far as our geometry of the track. So sometimes if the light rail, if we want a station, sometimes we have to keep the bridge up higher or the alignment higher so that we can get a flat spot for a station. So sometimes the bridge work might be long. You may not understand why it's so long, but if we're trying to get a station or we're trying to avoid something, sometimes we have to stay high a little bit longer to avoid that thing and either get a station in or to avoid some creek or something like that.
Thank you, Andy. Will the parking structure at I-485 be directly accessible from the off-ramp from 485 enter? I see Jenna or Andy.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
Sure. So yeah, there will be access. However, not direct access from the highway. There's NCDOT controls access from their facilities for a certain distance. So there will not be a driveway off of the off ramp, but you will be able to, and Andy's pointing on the screen there, you will be able to get off the highway, off the off ramp, and go through an intersection, turn into a parking deck right there. That's what we're looking at right now. So that's the plan. Make it as easy as possible so that people can get to it and utilize it.
Thank you, Jenna. We received a lot of questions tonight, so I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as possible in the essence of time, but letting everyone know if we do not get to your question this evening, we will provide a follow-up FAQ afterwards. Will the people mover connection to the airport be built in conjunction with the Silver Line? Surely we're not going to build the Silver Line only to have the airport deliver its mover years later.
There you go. Thank you. So and I see Jennifer chiming in. So Jennifer with the airport, would you like to address that one?
Sure thing. Thanks. This is Jennifer Thompson, Economic and Community Affairs Manager with the Aviation Division. Thank you for that question. It's a really good one. We are planning for a dedicated guideway that will take passengers from the station, the Silver Line station, into the terminal. The actual construction of the people mover, I don't know if you're familiar with the people mover systems in ATL or LAX or Tampa, but the exact technology has not been determined yet, and we will determine that technology and how we fund it, along with the airport tenants who will be helping us to fund that project. So while we haven't decided on the exact technology, we are committed to having a way for passengers to get from the station to the terminal as soon as the Silver Line is operational.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. On the Gaston County side, how will the west traveling lanes of US 74 Wilkinson be affected once the light rail is complete?
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits of side running. The side running alignment is that the reconstruction of Wilkinson Boulevard will be minimal. So we don't have to get in and rebuild the whole street like we did on Tryon Street in the University City area. So the requirements of reconfiguring the road is much less. Not to say that we won't have to rebuild curbs here or there, but we definitely do not have to rebuild the road entirely. So it should be much less and minimal.
Thank you. How would the several elevated solutions affect the look of the area? Blue Line tends to intensify the industrial look around South Boulevard. Would that be the same here?
Yeah, so that's great question. So, once we kind of get into the design, we start designing the bridges, we'll start to come up with our concepts for how the bridges will look. The bridges, if people sound like this person asked a question, knows a lot about our structures. So the bridges that we build on the South Corridor look very different than the bridges we built on the Blue Line extension. And I anticipate the bridges that we would proceed with on build on the Silver Line would look very different than either one of those as well. But once we'll answer a lot of those questions when we get into design about the particular way we're going to build the bridge and the materials and those sort of things. We would anticipate also doing artistic treatments as part of the project as well, similar to that of the Blue Line and Blue Line extension. Folks are familiar with some of the decorative handrails and painted girders, decorative form liners that we did for the Blue Line extension. And I think a lot of people really appreciate our bridges and think that's a good investment for the project. So we would anticipate having a program similar to that. But I think that's a question as we get into design. We'd want to open up that dialogue with the community and the many stakeholders to kind of get an understanding of what people's expectations are for those bridges, and maybe show some precedents for some other areas, and get some information so that when we begin our design process, we understand what the community kind of wants and expects.
Thanks, Andy. And I also want to use this opportunity to see if John Howard, who's leading our TOD study. John, is there anything you would like to add? I know I kind of put you on the spot there. I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. And Andy's done a lot of heavy lifting tonight, and Jenna. So our TOD ordinance that we've got has design regulations for how we treat buildings, and also we have on a call NCDOT and CDOT, and it's going to work with us as well to make sure that we design safe streets and safe connections. So part of the TOD planning effort, we'll look at infrastructure improvements. Andy mentioned a CIP component of that. If you look at like Tryon Street, if you look at South Boulevard and We have bike lanes, we have wider sidewalks. So we try to make sure that people get to and from these places safely. That's most important. And if you look at the map on the screen, you kind of see how development is not quite built out. So the more connections, the better, in our opinion. So again, getting multiple connections to the stations is very important, again, to support the kind of land use and development goals that we have. And with that, not every station area is going to be the same. Not everyone's going to look like South Boulevard or South End or NoDa. So each one will mature a little bit differently. Belmont, once you get into the city of Belmont, we have our Belmont planners on the call as well. So we'll work with them, and of course Belmont Abbey College to plan the land uses around that station area. But in between that and Charlotte, before it gets more urban, it's really industrial and more suburban. So expectations there may not be mixed use. So I think it's gonna be a very different looking corridor than others, but that's okay. It's 26 miles of a continuous light rail service, so not all places will look alike. But we're going to try to build this to make sure we support our communities and placemaking efforts and make sure that we design for the context around these sites now and in the future.
Thank you, John. We just have a few more minutes this evening, so I'm going to just do one or two more questions. My question is, how would the bus routes along the Silver Line be affected? Will they be cut down or eliminated to save ridership? And I think this is a good one for Jason Lawrence. Yeah, all right, thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. Great question. With each of our light rail projects, the original Blue Line, the Blue Line extension, we did a bus rail integration plan of how each of the bus routes in the corridor would enter into the stations. And through that process, some routes are taken directly to the station. We create new routes, and we would do that same process for this. The goal would be to people who are riding the bus the opportunity to use the light rail, but also bring new people to the station area that may not already be on a bus route.
Thank you, Jason. And this will be our last question for the evening. Again, the ones that we did not get to, we will make sure we do a follow-up. And will the parking decks have green roofs? I think that was an interesting question.
I think that's a cool idea. We will. I don't know that we will have green roofs, and maybe I'd pitch it to Jenna, who might have some ideas. But we are doing the sustainability evaluation for the project. I don't know. Jenna probably knows more about sustainability and green technologies than I do, so I'll pitch it to Jenna to address.
Sure. As part of our sustainability evaluation, we will be looking at opportunities to have treatments that are beneficial for the environment, filtering the water, and that can also help with some of our stormwater, meeting some of our stormwater ordinance requirements. But yeah, green roofs, solar panels, all those components of a structure that has a lighter imprint on the environment. Those are the kind of things we'll be looking at through our sustainability certification strategy. And so those details will be fleshed out as we go forward in our design, as we dig into that a little bit further. But that's certainly something that we have on our list to look into and see how it works for the various structures. Okay, so it looks like we're getting right to 6:30 here, and I think I want to take the opportunity to share my screen and do one last pitch for, there you go, sorry. I'm just going to pick that slide that has all of the information on how you can contact us and participate. Okay, so please visit www.ridetransit.org/LYNX Silverline to find additional information on how you can access the online open house and the online survey. We'd love your feedback. The commenting period ends March 11th. And Andy, can you pull that up for me? Thank you.
Is that the one you want?
One more. Yes, thank you. You can text Silverline to 704-461-4441 to access the survey. And we do have, when you enter the survey, when you take the survey, you will be entering, there's an opportunity to enter to win one of 5 $100 gift cards. So just some incentive to take that survey. You can also send us an email if you have questions or comments. You can send us an email at linkssilverline@publicinput.com. You can give us a call at 704-336-7433. You can also leave voicemail for comments, and you dial 704-461-4441 and type the code 6636. Or you can send us a letter to Charlotte Area Transit System, care of Marketing Department, 3200 South Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28209. Thank you all for your time and focus tonight. We really appreciate all the great comments and questions and your time this evening. Please stay tuned and stay involved, and your input is absolutely critical to us in helping make the right decisions moving forward for this transformational project. We look forward to engaging with you all in the future.